Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Babylon Irons match preview with myself and Sloth today. And it's a big one. Chelsea at home. It's one of those fixtures you probably look out for at the beginning of the season. And yeah, we've got it at a time where we desperately need points. Sloth, how are you feeling after that? Decent point at St James's Park last time out.
I feel all right, actually. I feel better than I thought I would, especially after some of my predictions last week, where I didn't really think we stood a chance. I do feel like we could go there. Well, sorry, they could come to us and we'll have a point to prove, especially after the last game when we were robbed of a point. I think we will go there and sorry, I keep saying we will go there, but they'll come to us and we will look to really put out a message, especially with some of the other results in the league over the past week.
Yeah, I think even on their side, they're having a lot of issues themselves. We'll get onto it in a minute, but they're not sitting pretty in the league, just as we're not. So Graham Potter's got a few things still to figure out. It's still early for him. He's brought in a lot of players in January, still embedding them. Obviously, it's going to take time, but they've spent a lot of money, and you'd expect a few of those players to play on the weekend. They're going to have João Felix back as well after his 3-match suspension, so that's another one to look out for. So in terms of Graham Potter as a manager, before we get into the actual analysis of this match, do you think he can be a success for them? Do you think it's a bit too early to judge him on what he's done so far?
I feel like with Chelsea, it's really difficult. And I've been trying to think of a nice way to kind of describe this situation, but there isn't really one. I feel like he's a lamb to the slaughter, to be honest, because let's face it, if managers who succeed at Chelsea have to have a proven track record, and it's nothing against Potter. I hear he's a lovely bloke and his job at Brighton was fantastic, but I think you're dealing with egos, you're dealing with huge pressure, and the demands that has are massively different to Brighton. That's no disrespect to Brighton, but can I see Graham Potter being a manager who wins 2 titles on the trot and who is competing in the Champions League? Well, I'd love to be wrong and say and see it, but I just don't. I just don't, especially with their current ownership and I want to say policy, but is a high spending scattergun approach that, don't get me wrong, they've signed some fantastic players. So they're players that would improve any side, but it just feels like such a almost like the old trolley dash sort of approach where you're running through a shop and you're just throwing things in. I don't know how he's going to command the respect of some of the players that they've got. And I almost feel like with the options who are available, it's that ticking clock is getting quicker and quicker. And
it ticks fast at Chelsea as well.
Yeah, I think I just kind of feel sorry for the guy. He's taken the job at the wrong time. And unfortunately for him, the bloke who's taken his job after he's left is absolutely nailing it. So it really throws into question a lot of the work that he did.
Let's take a look at the stats going into this game for both West Ham and Chelsea. So you can see here, same amount of games played, only 17 games left of the season now. We are just above the relegation zone after Leeds picked up a point at Old Trafford in midweek. So we're slipped down to 17th now. They're sitting in 9th and they're actually only 11 points ahead of us. So the gap isn't too big considering we're 17th and they're, 9th. And they've got 3 more wins than us. But in total, 11 points ahead of us, considering how bad we think our season has been, it kind of puts it into perspective of how poor Chelsea have been. And, they had a lot of expectation with the new ownership, the new manager coming in halfway through the season. they thought Graham Potter was their man, and you know, part of their project, and they've backed him in the January transfer window, and albeit like you mentioned, the trolley dash approach. But it's interesting that they're only 11 points ahead at this stage of the season. I was quite staggered when I saw that. But do you think going into this we're going to be the team that are more confident, or can you see it being the other way around?
I mean, at the end of the day, we got a point away at a very difficult place to go, but I still think Chelsea are they're going to be the more confident team heading into this. As we've both said, you know, it is getting to that point where it's squeaky bum time, and we are just outside the relegation zone. I think obviously there's pressure on Chelsea because they're Chelsea, but I think they know they've got to turn it around, and they also know they've got the quality to do that. Unfortunately for us, we're missing players in key positions, and there is a lot more pressure on us because we are battling for our survival. That's whether we like it or not. I know there's a lot of football left to play, but it's getting to the point where teams around us are picking up points and we cannot drop too many. So I think there's a lot more pressure on us because our survival is at stake.
Yeah, I think as well as being, you know, the home team in this match, we've actually done pretty well against Chelsea at home in recent, you know, but since we've actually moved to the London Stadium, you know, we've had a couple of 3-2 wins, that one with Yarmolenko in lockdown, the one last season. So I feel like we'd probably be quite confident going into this just because of the results we've had against them, and we've made it quite a tough place for them to come. But obviously, that kind of goes out the window when you're on the pitch, and it's a completely different ball game with the players that we're going to have and they're going to have. But let's look at, you know, how we could potentially line up, because there has been rumours that both Zouma and Scamacca are back in, you know, training with the first team, so they could potentially be pushing for a start. But in terms of the lineup, with what we've gone with this as our predicted exercise. So only one change from the midweek last weekend's match against Newcastle, which is pretty much forced because Kehrer came off injured. So Ben Johnson comes back into that back three with Aguerd and Ogbonna. Yeah, the fullbacks stay the same, wing back should I say, with Kufau and Emerson, and then you've got the Rice Paqueta midfield and the trio of Benrahma, Bowen and Antonio up top. I think it would be surprising if we saw anything kind of too dissimilar to this, just because I think Moyes has opted for this 5 at the back formation now, and he kind of wants to push that going forwards, especially with the defensive options we've got at the moment. It's interesting to see whether someone like Zouma or Scamacca will come in and just start straight away. I think I could see Moyes doing it with Zouma if he's fit enough to just play, but just because of, you know, desperation. We need a centre back in there. What do you reckon, Slough? Would you be happy with this lineup if it came out?
I'd much rather that than risking Zouma coming back straight away. I think it's a foolhardy approach if we just throw him back in. I have heard rumours that the club actually don't know when Zouma's going to be back, and that he's seeing a specialist for that knee, which doesn't exactly fill me with hope. But I like Johnson in that right side position. I think he offers good cover for Coufal. I think if you're looking at someone like Mudryk's pace, then having two players to potentially double up on him is a good, safe approach. But do I think either of them should come straight back in? Not really. I think the only player that I would just put straight back in is probably Scamacca, and that's purely because Antonio's come in and he's done some good things, but I just don't see how him not scoring is defensible for a forward. So I would put Scamacca straight back in when he comes back to fitness. But obviously that's dependent on how results come about. I know there are questions being asked about the medical team's approach. We've spoken about the injections given to players before, and hopefully Danny Ings isn't far off because he's been training with the first team all week apparently. Yeah. So having someone like that on the bench is definitely a positive.
Apparently, Ings came when he came on against Newcastle the other day. He actually had a little bit of a knock again, so that's why they were assessing him this week. But yeah, I think he's got through that okay.
Well, that's positive and worrying to hear at the same time. But I think going back to that lineup, Johnson at right centre back for me, I think that's a fairly positive approach. As I mentioned, it's a bit of pace along that back line. Ogbonna's been a rock, but let's face it, the last thing he possesses is pace.
He needs pace around him, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So Aguerd and Johnson on either side is a real positive. But the thing that probably excites me the most in that lineup, and I probably sound a bit boring here, is Emerson at left back. Emerson at that left wing back position, because he's going to have a point to prove.
Yeah,
and he's going to want to go out against Chelsea and give his absolute best performance in the shirt and say, this is what you're missing out on.
I remember him being actually one of our better performers in the reverse fixture. I think he played left back that day in a back four, and he was excellent. That was probably one of his first games he played for us. And I remember thinking he had a very good game.
Yeah, he was, and it was about the time where I think he picked up an ankle knock or something, and for some reason when he got fit again, we just didn't put him back into the first team. But I'm looking forward to seeing how he does against Chelsea, and I think with some of their defensive question marks, it could be a chance for someone like Antonio to go out and prove a point, make me look like a mug. So I'd be more than happy to have that happen.
Yeah, I think in terms of where we can hurt Chelsea, it is going to be, I think, down that side where Bowen is, because it looks like Reece James is back now. He played about an hour in their last match, and then I saw Ben Chilwell was on the bench, but they did play Cucurella in their match against Fulham. But apparently Ben Chilwell is pushing to be starting, and he's just come back to fitness. So if Chilwell starts, it'll be a bit more difficult. But if Cucurella starts at left back, he has not been good for Chelsea at the moment, and their fans are saying it. He just defensively, he just looks really, really vulnerable. Playing in that Brighton setup, in that back three that he had, probably suited him a bit more. And now he's being exposed a little bit in this back four that Chelsea are trying to play. So if we go back to our lineup here, I think that Bowen in that inside channel, as we've said so many times, is the danger for us. And we tried it against Newcastle. It was more that Benrahma was kind of coming infield with the ball, and Bowen was kind of trying to make those runs in behind. So I fully expect us to do the same. We had, similar success last season against Chelsea at home doing this. So yeah, I think this would be a good lineup, considering the options we've got available at the moment. And, I guess the only question mark would be, would you bring in someone like Fornals for Benrahma? Because, Benrahma didn't have the best of games against Newcastle, and maybe Moyes wants a bit more of a work rate on that left-hand side, as we've seen before. What do you think? Would you be happy to see that, or not really?
Nah, I just think playing Fornals out of position in a game that you need to win, as good as Fornals is, and he'll give you 100% effort. I think if you want to play him there, then you're asking for trouble against.
Do you think it could work a little bit better now if we had Emerson playing left wing back instead of someone like, I don't know, Cresswell or whoever? Do you think that could help him?
I think it would allow him a lot more ability to drift inside and to play more of that central position that we know he excels in. But I just think at the end of the day, Moyes is going to want his wide man to stick wide. It's one of the things that really baffled me about the transfer window, was that we didn't look to get in pace. And, even just if you think about Tete at Leicester, that deal was quite an easy one to get done.
Yeah.
And if you have Bowen and Tete either side of Antonio, you're causing problems. Yeah. So I think it's almost a good option to have because of what skill, work rate, and also his ability to create that Fornals gives you. But I don't see the point in dropping a left winger to play to not play for someone who doesn't play left wing.
I think that's the thing at the moment with Fornals. When we're going to play this 5-2-3 that we seem to be playing at the moment, there just isn't man for man, he doesn't get in just because of the Rice Paqueta midfield. And like you mentioned, you don't really want Fornals left wing, especially when you have someone like Benrahma.
I worry it's another example of this Moyes mentality of, well, I wanted him to be a player who scores 8 goals and brings us, but he's just not playing him there. And Fornals can do that well. He can be that centre attacking mid that he thought Paqueta was, but for some reason he's just not playing him there. And when you've got someone who runs the channels like Antonio does, having that person who can pass the ball through, find that space for him, you would think is the answer to the question.
And I would liken it. I don't want to say it just because Arsenal fans will take it out of context, but I would liken that midfield three of Rice, Paqueta, Fornals to their lineup of Partey, Xhaka, and Odegaard, with Fornals being the one that's similar to Odegaard, just because they're not both blessed with pace, but their football intelligence is very high.
I mean, I don't really care what Arsenal fans have to say, to be honest, because that's just my own personal opinion, particularly when it comes to the personnel in their midfield department. But I do think that they have that ability. They have the level. They haven't shown it as of yet. I think against Newcastle, that was Rice's best game of the season potentially for it.
Definitely.
As Trippier said, he absolutely ran that show, and you can argue it's against Longstaff, and it's not the same quality that you would get against Chelsea at the weekend or against one of the other sort of top sides, but you can only play against who's in front of you.
Exactly.
And I think having that athleticism, that ability on the ball, and that work rate makes you a problem for any side. Personally, I think we know how Antonio and Bowen like to play and come wide and drift in and out of these positions. I would personally just drop Benrahma. I think he's been fantastic, but if you put a 5-3 and then a 2 up top, I think that's a far better option for us. It does lack you width, but that's why you have the wing backs. And playing with Fornals, Rice and Paqueta in that 3, I think you're going to create. You've got goals in there, but you've also got work rate. And when you have Bowen and Antonio, who can have a bit more of a free range, they can free roam. Sorry, they're not chickens, but when they have that ability and that athleticism to cause problems, then it's something that Benrahma doesn't really do. But also you can bring him off the bench and you can put him in that middle area and say, you're one of the 3 and this is your role, because we know that that's what he did a lot at Brentford, and he played in that BMW setup.
Yeah, I think, just looking at this as well, your point's really good there. If we did bring in, say, Fornals for Benrahma, if you can visualize this, if you're watching at home, you would have Fornals almost behind where Antonio is right now, but Antonio would sort of drift to the left-hand side and Bowen would sort of drift to the right-hand side. So I think you would still have that width, Fornals would almost be that false 9, and it would be interesting to see that, because it would give us an extra man in midfield that we know is very good on the ball and in terms of, keeping possession and playing those passes through. And it also gives the license for Antonio to drift wide and, do what he naturally likes to do, which is play on the wing.
I think one of the reasons that so many people always like to tell me is that the 5 at the back doesn't work is because for so long we've had Ogbonna and Dawson, and they're great defenders, but they need pace around them. And when you have Aguerd and Johnson, you have that. You have the ability to kind of rely on those wing backs to do their job, but create that wide presence and offer an outlet for them at the back, particularly when you have someone with the range of passing that Aguerd does. So I almost think that we can sacrifice that width because we've got 2 wing backs who will give you that. And we've also got the pace at the back to counteract potential threats.
One last point I want to make before we get on to our predictions for this match is again, I mentioned it against Newcastle how important the midfield battle would be, and I think we actually came out on top despite being outnumbered. I think Rice and Paqueta did outstanding.
Mm.
I think it's going to be a similar situation this time around, and this time, like you mentioned, the quality maybe wasn't there against Newcastle, but Rice is coming up against Enzo Fernandez, and now he is a player, and he is a player that has even said himself watches Rice in terms of how he can improve his game. So, is this? I don't want to say it, but like this match could be won in the midfield again. You agree?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Enzo Fernandez is a player that I mentioned a while ago, but he's also someone that I speak to one of my friends about, who is he's a Sporting fan, and he travels a lot to sporting games, and he also watches a lot of Benfica, which I know sounds like a bit of a juxtaposition, but he loves his Portuguese football. Now, the only issue with Enzo Fernandez is that he has not played a lot of top level football, and people love to throw up the World Cup at you and say, look, he's won the World Cup. And it's an incredible achievement. And I'm not trying to take that away in any way. But when it comes to European football and league football, in terms of top leagues, he's not played in those for very long. And the Premier League is a big step up from the Portuguese league. I mean that, no disrespect, but he can be bullied. And I like Enzo Fernandez. He's a fantastic player on the ball. He's almost like a little pit bull at times. He will win you the ball back and he will throw himself about, but he can be bullied. And if Rice can just use his athleticism, use his frame and his size against him, then I think, as you say, that battle can be won. But if he comes up against Zakaria, who I think isn't having the best time at Chelsea, I know he's been utilised as a bit of a
I think he's injured at the moment as well. So
okay. Well, it seems like they have got those kind of wardrobes in the midfield. They have got someone like Kovacic who isn't as big, but strength wise knows how to use his body. And I think that could be the area where we, as you say, we win or lose the match. And if we're up against Gallagher, I feel a lot more confident, because even though he has a point to prove, I just don't think he's the level as those players that I mentioned. But Enzo Fernandez, I think he's a fantastic footballer. It will just be a case of, has he quite adjusted to the league yet? We saw him kind of struggle, not struggle, but we saw him adjusting to the league last week. And when you come up against the ability of Rice and Paqueta, I think that is a better test almost.
Yep, we were going to see. So before we leave stuff, let's give our predictions for the match. And you know what? I'm going to start first. I'm actually going to be positive here. I think we're going to win, and I think we're going to win 2-1. I just think at the moment with how Chelsea are, they just don't have a settled team at all. We do have more of a settled team despite our injuries and changing, but I don't know. I just feel like based on how good we've been against Chelsea at home and the importance of this match for us, I can't see us losing the match, and I think we might just nick it 2-1. So what do you think?
I'm going to go with 2-2. I was going to be quite positive, but then I remembered that they've got quite a lot of pace, and they've added to their line now with Mudryk, and especially with Datro Fofana, who I think is a really exciting young player. They've got that pace, but they've also got that physicality. And anyone who's seen Mudryk's little gym twerking videos for Arsenal that he was posting, they know he has got strength on top of his speed. So I think we will probably concede. I'm going to go for 2-2 because I think we've also got goals in us.
Well, I think most West Ham fans would be happy with a point. Even, I know the situation we're in, we do need 3 points, but, Chelsea is a tough fixture. So hopefully we can perform. It's the early kickoff on Saturday, so I'm sure we'll be up for it, and hopefully we'll make it a difficult test for Chelsea and get the better of them. And we'll see the likes of, like we mentioned, Rice and Paqueta, how important they're going to be, and how we can look to exploit them in our wing back system, and whether he'll go with Antonio or will someone like Scamacca come straight in if he's fit. So we'll see. We hope that we get the result. We hope we can move further away from the relegation zone because it's getting tight there. And as we mentioned, there's only 17 games left to go. So we need to start getting those points soon. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Make sure to follow us over on Twitter at Babbling Irons if you haven't already. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and Sloth, one thing left to say. Come on,
you Irons.